You need a pair of feet, some muscles, the odd stone or two, a lump of old iron, a fair amount of your own puff, and a finely tuned, delicate-sounding musical instrument. One or two trees, roughly trimmed, and if possible, and to guarantee complete success, a liberal sprinkling of well-known people, the sort of neighbours you'd like to see at one of your parties. Mix all these things well together, and you've got the Games. Although many Scots, and mainly those without any sense of history, or without any idea of romance, or whose knees look, well, just odd, decry and go to great lengths to belittle what they call the heather and tartan image of their own country, there are those who actually like it and go to great lengths to promote it, successfully too. They see nothing wrong in having a good time, a good day out, and if someone else, the foreigners say, or even the English want to join in, then it's more than all right with them. If you feel that way inclined, you can even take part. It's not a bad thing having a good time, and a lot of people do just that. Nearly 1 million people every year watch the Highland Games and gatherings, not many fewer in fact than go to football matches in Scotland. It's an age-old ritual, these games. Once a year the sheds get opened up and the paraphernalia gets trotted out. The pikes and axes from Lonach, the stones and weights and hammers, the bunting and notices and flags. There are nearly 120 meets each year, and although most of them, in their present form, date only from about the early 19th century, each one usually has a small gimmick of its own, a small twist to the usual proceedings, that touch of hazy history which makes up so much of life in Britain generally, and Scotland in particular. At some, there are marches by the local clan to remind a neighbouring clan of some long-forgotten trespass, some real or imagined slight or feat of arms. At others, there are fairgrounds, betting, flying displays, fly casting competitions, wrestling, boat and hill races, special events for the kids. On Skye, the arena is so small the athletes get dizzy running round the mile. At Aberfeldy, there's a piping quartet. At Tomintoul, they get short of breath because of the altitude. At Tobermory, there's a special boat from the mainland, and competitors and crowd get piped through the town to the field. But in all of them, there are some ingredients which are common and essential. Piping, dancing, running, jumping, trials of strength and stamina, man against man, and all that sort of thing. The outsider's view of the games is, to say the least, odd and varied. In the 1860s, the French, in a book about world sport and its history, actually illustrated this curious and Scottish phenomenon, the artist being allowed the most liberal interpretation. And later on, an English publication put forward its own ideas of the athletes who attended such occasions. No honest, sweaty sons of toil here. No need for the heavy breathing, the last and desperate struggle for the prize. No, just the quiet dignity, the noble elegance of simple clansmen enjoying themselves, though the illustrator was loath not to let his thoughts stray too far from Park Lane or Princes Street. And even today, the simple Swedes have their own views on the Jolly Highlander, though not perhaps quite so decorously expressed. But whatever outsiders think of him and his antics, the locals aren't all that worried. They actually don't seem to mind about the image, and why should anyone else? It is, after all, rather nice to look at.
Here's a health to Mr. Faulkner, Mr. Alistair, and all the Wallace. Hip, 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 hooray! Hip, hip, hooray! Hip, hip, hooray!
The games and gatherings are an odd mixture. The clan idea is big in the Highlands, if not in Glasgow. And it's nice to have a bit of tradition, even if you only invented it 100 years ago. And there's a flag, of course, to go with everything and everyone who's of any importance locally. Every clan, you see, has to have a chief. It's their big day, whether he's got some splendid title and a castle to go with it, or whether he's just a plain sir or a laird with a lesser place to live in. The bigger the chief, of course, the bigger the crowd. And you can't get much bigger than the most famous chief of all. But that's boasting, because these chiefs live just down the road, in a holiday house that's called Balmoral. This afternoon out was started by Queen Victoria when she bought Balmoral and embraced all things Scottish. Edward VII continued the custom, and although since their day the games and gatherings have expanded a bit, the actual Highlander hasn't changed very much at all.
Come on, boys! Bow!
Yes!
Come on, lads! Bow! Bow! Come on! Come on! Oh, you lads! Come on!
Who won the first heat?
Come on! Oh, come on! Come on!
Right. Give it. One.
Go on, boys! Come on, boys! Come on, boys! Go! Come on! Come on, get off here! Get him off!
In 1746, the English Parliament, frightened of the trouble which can be caused by outlandish habit, banned all things Highland like the kilt and the pipes. It wasn't a very successful move, and it didn't take very long before it all crept back again. And at the gatherings there's often a competition for the best dressed Highlander, just to encourage the others. Getting a Highlander into his clobber can be quite a formidable task. No debutante ever suffered so much in the cause of history. Not that history is all that accurate. It's got a way of getting bent a bit in the process of its making. There's a lot of argument about things tartan, whether the Highlander was ever really aware of it, whether Queen Victoria invented it because it looked pretty, whether the Scots all originally wore just lumps of old woven cloth draped about their nether regions with a bit of old leather to stuff their money in. Whatever the truth, it does look rather good. Fine leather, badgers' heads for the sporran, heavy jackets handed down from father to son, often for years before memory, buttons bearing a clan or military crest in solid silver, and cross belts, and belts with silver buckles on leather so old and venerated that only the polish holds it together. Perhaps this is the origin of the phrase, getting dressed to kill.
And this is the blade. And formally it requires two to do it. You take the first step in your left hand, Hold it like that. Then you take the next one. You see, in days gone by when the shepherds came over the hill, they all slept in these things. Get a pulse on it. It's only form of warmth and shelter ahead at night, with the result that we've still retained them. Now take 5, Sandy. Now, watch. Give it a good pull. Right? Take 6. Repeat that rug again. Now, take 7. Repeat a pull again. Now, take the last one. Now, that's it. Whenever you put that on, it's just every step pulls out its own place. The game's complete. Right, this is the trade now. There's quite a lot of assistance. There's 3 men to put it on. There will be 1 east on it, that's 3. Now, the other one take it. The other end. That's right for length now. Ready? Bit along. That's right. Now, hold hard against me now. Now, just put it in there. That's nice and firm. That's it. Now, what about my claymore? Now, we're off.
To most visitors, the games come as a surprise. They're not all sword dancing, skirling and supermen. It's a great day out for the locals, a sort of super village fete, manse garden tea party and athletics meeting all rolled into one. It was always meant that way, and it still is.
Here's course 4 coming up.
The countryside of Scotland, which attracts nearly 12 million tourists a year from all over the world, contains within itself the origins of modern clannish ways and its celebration in events like the gatherings and the games. As the clans became more and more broken, spread apart by the great Highland clearances before and after the rebellions in the early 18th century, as repression of all sacred Highland things like tartan and pipe music grew worse, so the people's determination to preserve such things prospered. They say that tartan reflects the colours of the countryside, that the music of the pipes mirrors the soul of the Scots. It's the sort of saying that gets right up the noses of those sophisticates from Glasgow and Edinburgh who'd have none of it. who say that such thoughts, such words endear their countrymen to the past and prevent them taking their place in the present. On the other hand, Scotland's got quite a bit of past to think about one way and another, and reminding themselves of it, as well as visitors and strangers, isn't all bad. That particular bit of past, which banned all things Highland, came to an end in the late 19th century when Prime Minister Gladstone, of his own volition, saw its unreason. And when Queen Victoria endorsed his wisdom by her own presence at Balmoral, national pride leapt forth and grew afresh. But the past never dies, and there's a lot to remind the traveller and native alike in the great ruins which dot the vast Highland landscape, the grim reminders of an even grimmer history. But whatever the rights and wrongs, and whether history lies or speaks the truth, one fact remains. There is to all Scots, and to a great many others besides, a haunting and beautiful rightness about the pipes played in such a sombre setting. To understand at least part of the complex character of the Scots, you have to appreciate the enormous fascination they have for throwing things. It doesn't really matter what, providing it's awkward, heavy, and reasonably available. Take, for instance, the hammer. In the old days, it came from the local smithy. It's all a bit more formal now, of course, but it still weighs 16 or 22 pounds, and you've got to hurl it a good 100 feet or more to stay up with the big boys. The spikes on the boots may look a bit odd, but they ensure you keep your feet firmly on the ground and don't follow the hammer into the judges. And although the art of hammer throwing owes little to that of Nijinsky or Diaghilev, it could be a thought. There is a sort of balletic grace about 17 stones of muscle power. Then there are stones. Stones of one sort and another play a significant part in the games. Not that stones are all that difficult to find hereabouts. There's a long tradition of stone hunting. Hunting that perfect stone ground round by the ice ages of nature, polished smooth by centuries of tumbling water. If you do find the perfect one, treasure it. No true Scot would ever dream of just chucking it away, except for practice. Oh no. At the very least, he'd stick it on his gatepost, or get someone else to do so for all to see. There are dozens of stones scattered about on top of Highland gateposts. It's a deep and enduring passion. But others are just too damned awkward, and they lie laden with strongman challenge beside the Highland roads, all 265 pounds of them. Others have ring bolts in them to make it really easy. On the left, 400 weight. On the right, a mere 3. They say that Highland strongman Donald Dinny actually carried both stones, one in either hand, across the Pottach Bridge 120 years ago. That's Donald Dinny there, with a chest full of medals to prove it. Not that he was the greatest. They all were, in their own eyes, right from the days when Napoli, the Italian strongman, visited Scotland with a travelling circus about 1850 and stayed to encourage the natives to greater efforts. What a marvellous bunch of toughs they really were. There are a few rules, it's true, in these heavy events, perhaps honoured more in the breach than in the observance. They seem quite simple, though. Number of turns, not putting your foot over the barrier, that sort of thing. These stones weigh 16 or 22 pounds apiece. A simple lob has to average about 40 feet before you stand a chance.
Charlie Allen, Mithlick, first to throw. Right?
And if you get tired of flinging a stone, you can have a go with a lump of iron on a chain, 22 pounds of it. At least 100 feet, or you're considered a poor wee thing.
Well, I was starved after my last throw, but I neck, yeah. Oh, no, damn it. Shit. I think fly's too far in.
Maybe not to grow old, but it looks like it.
You know, I'd like to feel my footwork was really smooth.
You know, have a look around your neck. If you've lost the locket, you'll get it from me
Look at it.
just behind your...
That's a pity. Yeah.
But boredom is dangerous for strong men. So how about the weight for height? At least 14 feet, otherwise it's all really too easy. Just like that. The heavies live in a world of their own, a small, intimate group in the middle of the arena where they can't be too dangerous, eternally competing apparently against each other, but in reality against their own selves. A distance of 1 inch along the ground or high above it can make all the difference to their own self-esteem. Each effort is analyzed, dissected, watched. Each best throw seems only to increase the chances of future despair. Professionalism now sweeps the boards at the games, and although the modern games are now often more of an athletics meeting than the old-style gatherings perhaps ever were, the frills make it a better spectacle and a better day out for the family than the usual dreary sportsdrome meeting. The military have long taken a hand at the classier games, though locals are protected by the holding of closed society events. Not that the military have it all their own way in the open competitions. Runners of Olympic standard travel far to the gatherings. Quite large sums are wagered on races, but they do say that the bad old days when men ran with lead in their shoes to confuse handicappers and bookies alike are now far gone. In fact, the games suffer not one bit from any of this. Professionals, amateur, the great, the small, the more there is to see, the more people there are to meet. Even despair at handicappers and stewards doesn't last very long.
Now can we have the competitors for the dancing? The open dancing.
Tight, tight! Come on, pass it out! come on! Yes! Push it! Tight, Ned! Come on, keep it tight! Keep it tight! On! Brace it, lad, brace! And yes, come on! And yes, come on! Yes! Push! Come on, work, lad! Keep it on tight, come on, push! Come on, lads, keep it going! Keep it going! Come on! Push, push! Keep it tight, lads.
On the dancing board, we are starting the competition of Gilly Callum of the short dance. This dance is the survival of the day.
Feet, 3.5 inches. 18 feet, 1 inch. You go back forward, go back. 18 feet, 2.5 inches.
Alex Mackenzie of Gile.
But perhaps the gravest art of all is the piping. Like many Scottish traditions, piping is not uniquely a Scottish skill. Pipers from all over the world come to the Games to be judged by stern critics like Pipe Major Nicol, former Pipe Major to the Queen. The piper's world is an in-world, if you like, a world apart from lesser mortals.
Just arrived, I have to tune my pipe a wee bit.
Oh, well.
Give me
Yeah.
give me some time with it.
Very good.
No, that's real like
At one time, the pipers were only heard and never seen, so that no undue influence was brought to bear on the judges. Many tunes are centuries old, and all are intricate of detail, curious of melody. The judges sit all day to listen. So do many others, wrapped deep in coats and their own opinions. It's an experience that few people outside Scotland would willingly endure. Several hundred people compete in the Highland Games each year, but only a few, very few, ever have a go at that most obsessional of Scottish legends, tossing the caber. And of those that do have a go, even fewer ever manage it at all.
You need hands sincere when you for the ladies and gentlemen.
Your average caber weighs about 120 pounds and is nearly 20 feet long. They say it's a knack to toss it so that it lies straight at 12 o'clock to your line of run.
A perfect throw is one which lands exactly at 12 o'clock away from the competitor.
Ah well, some of us have it, some of us don't. Even 17-stone weaklings have been known to succeed, and really strong men fail miserably. But it's fun to watch all the same. And the failures are often just as spectacular as the successes. And at the end of the day, what's in it for them all? Tables laden with silver trophies and cups, some to take home with you unless you live abroad, some to bear your name engraved for evermore. You join the ranks of the great, the dexterous, the strong, if you carry one off. It's where the chiefs come in again. If you're lucky, and if you're a military team captain, then the greatest chief of them all will hand you the shield which records the triumphs of annual exertion, bearing the badges of history. But for individuals, hidden among the cups and bowls and assorted silverware, are further goodies, bottles mainly, and money. The games and gatherings pay out altogether about £100,000 in prize money each year. Single prizes range from £1 or £2 to £100. Some of the competitors do very well at it, and so do some of the societies who run the proceedings. Most of these friendly societies were formed in the early 19th century to protect their own members against unemployment, accident, or death. Their other purpose was to promote the old Highland arts of strength and skill. None of the societies ever make a fortune from their games. On the other hand, they don't lose, and it would be a pity if they did. A pity to think that one day everyone would go home, never to come back another year. At present, there doesn't seem to be much danger of that.